everybody. I'm Marilyn, CEO and founder of Cosmic Centaurs and the host of this weekly live video series called CentaurStage. As you know, CentaurStage is a weekly video series where we explore amazing ideas about the future of work and learning every Thursday afternoon at 2:30 p.m. UAE time with myself and some incredible guests. We have three formats: the discuss, debate, and dissent format. And today I'll be speaking with Dr. Myriam Hadnes about the art of virtual facilitation, how to make workshops work, and her recent Never Done Before Facilitation Festival. Myriam, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, let me tell everybody a little bit about the 17,000 things that you do. So Myriam is a behavioral economist by training, a podcaster by passion, a facilitator by profession. She's German by birth and Amsterdamer by choice. Before starting her business, Myriam had a career in higher education and research, which allowed her to work, live, and explore in so many amazing places like Vietnam, Burkina Faso, and Luxembourg. Today, she's the founder of a really fantastic podcast called Workshops Work and her company. She follows the vision that we can change the world one workshop at a time, because all it takes to change the world is effective collaboration. She's the host of the Workshops Work podcast, where she inspires fellow facilitators like myself to design and deliver workshops that deliver results. She's a pragmatic dreamer, a sense maker, a connector of ideas and people, and she creates opportunities for others to collaborate. And we're going to talk about the amazing festival that she put together this year, which was such a grand, experience for me. Just a few things before we start. Give this video a like, share it with people who you think might want to watch it. Of course, it'll be on replay and it'll be available later, but there's no time like the present. And if you want to say something or ask a question, please put it in the comment box, and Tala, our producer, will be on the lookout for those, and so will I, in order to bring them up. So let's get started. Myriam, I'm a teacher, I'm a podcast host, I'm a team leader, I'm a moderator, and I know how important it is to create amazing learning experiences that are engaging and insightful. And as I was pursuing, my own learning curve around facilitation, that's, how I discovered you and discovered your amazing podcast, and then followed you. And then that led to me taking part in the Never Done Before Facilitation Festival. And I remember I come back to my teams and I was always mind blown, especially because I was part of the co-design piece. So just for everybody here who doesn't know what we're talking about, can you explain to everyone what the Never Done Before Festival was, how you thought about it, how you structured it? And I'll show, a bit of the agenda and some of the passes and so on as you're talking, but I really feel like you need to help me put this in a nugget for everyone, because it was such a rich experience.
Thank you. I'm glad that it inspired you so much. So in a nutshell, it was basically a festival or a conference to share the best practices of facilitation. And I invited my podcast guests to be the speakers. And Never Done Before started as a working title. Is there...
Yeah, it's okay. We can hear you, no worries. Yeah.
Perfect. So it started as a working title because I realized that every time I went to a conference about facilitation, I came back with this feeling of been there, done that. And I thought that my guests on the podcast, they have so much to share. And what they have shared on the recording is only a fraction of what they can do. And usually for clients, we always as facilitators tend to deliver the same things, and we lack the space to experiment and to play and to try out new things. So I thought, what if we gave them a stage to try formats that they've never done before? So it first was supposed to happen live in the physical world in Amsterdam, and then we had to pivot, and I was part of the virtual collaboration campus in March when Corona just started in Europe. And I realized what there is we can do online. So then Oscar Trimboli, one guest, he convinced me to bring it online. And we thought, okay, it's going to be global. It's going to be never done before. Hence, it needs to be 24 hours. It needs to be crazy. And this was basically the start. And then maybe since you mentioned the co-design process, and I think that's at the heart. So the question was, how do we know whether people actually want that? So what is the minimum viable product, and how do we know what our audience wants to learn? So we thought of turning it around, and instead of offering a lineup and an agenda, we asked the audience what they would like to experience. So we invited them to join a co-design process. So for a small fee of 20 euros, we invited you guys to tell us what you want to learn. And we thought it's going to be a one-off session, co-design session, just let's ideate. And it was so cool. There was such a positive spirit of just exploration and experimentation that we thought, why stopping after one session? Let's continue. So it became a co-design process until the festival.
Yeah, I participated in a few of these co-design sessions, and it was just so refreshing to be not just sitting there receiving things, but contributing to them and being able to shape what it was going to look like. But also, you guys did so many of these things in really interesting virtual spaces that ended up becoming part of the festival. I'm going to show a few pictures here. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about them and how you experienced them, and what were some of the things that really surprised you or surprised the attendees. And I'll share a little bit of my own experience as well.
Oh yeah, so these were the spaces that we had at the festival. And the idea was that we want participants to dive into the festival and to explore and make them not want to leave. Because what I realized that whenever I joined an online conference, as much as I might enjoy the workshop in that moment, the second it's over, I'm back in my own living room. And I'm totally disconnected from what's happening. So we thought, what can be the connector? What can be the environment that makes participants want to stick around and that connects the different sessions? So what you, and I did this with Shane Smart, who's basically the genius behind all these murals. And we thought, okay, so we need a space that makes participants curious enough to explore and to stay there. And on mural, you see all the small cursors. So you see exactly who is in the space at the time and where they're going and where they're exploring. And then since all of our guests were, all of our facilitators were guests on the podcast, they received a studio. And I think it was Ben who came up with the idea that we give them a space where they can basically showcase themselves. So they're not strangers. They all have a podcast episode. And what do they stand for? How would it be for a festival guest if we could look behind the scenes and learn a little bit about the person who's going to host the workshop? And then it was in a co-design session that the idea came up that actually we need a space to reflect. So very often there's a workshop and then there's another workshop, or we are thrown back into our daily routines, but we don't have time to. And there's self-reflection on the one hand, and it was in the design session that someone came up with a learning journal.
Yes.
A learning journal. It was on Theo, right? Yeah.
Yes, I love Theo. We'll talk about it in a minute.
Yes. So how would a learning journal then look like? And then this was when I sat together with Shane and with Ben, the UX team and the mural team. How can we make it entertaining? How can we integrate the learning experience and how to use mural? And how can we make it also applicable to organize the festival beforehand?
Yes. And so you created this mural that I showed just a little bit earlier, and each facilitator has this kind of like apartment, so to speak, on different levels, and you can visit their spaces and they put up things. And of course, there's a link to their video or their session and, you know, all the stuff you need to know for the actual session. But to your point, like this idea of lingering, of course, it was a 24-hour festival, so I didn't watch every session. And then when I came back and got this mural, I'm like, oh my God, it's like being inside somebody's home, you know, and being in their space. And to your point, like I felt like I was in their space, not in mine anymore. And the ability to explore and see what little trinkets they left there, and whether there was any like, you know, Easter eggs to be found in the space, and the notes that they took. And it just, even though I don't know these people, you know, for many of them, I just felt connected to who they are as a human, which was such a strange feeling to be having sitting at my desk looking at a screen, you know, a very beautiful one at that.
I'm so glad that you're saying that, because also in the co-design session, what came out was that it's actually the connection that counts. And the main expectation from such a festival from the participants was connection over content.
Yeah.
So how can we actually design or facilitate this human connection to the facilitators, but also amongst the participants? And if the studio helped to make this connection, makes me very happy.
Yeah, and it's incredible because it also creates it asynchronously. Like it's not even that I know that the other people are there at this moment and therefore I have to be present. It's also I can return to the space that we created together and be in it again and remember the things that we said or the thoughts that I had. And so I just found that experience so compelling for me.
Yeah.
I'd love to talk also, I'm going to bring back this image. So we had quite a few different virtual spaces also. So Miro obviously is a flat space, but we could visit different studios. But there was also like Teo, there was Borel, where we had an island to kind of hang out. And I experienced both of those. Let me try and describe. I'll start with Teo, so to the people watching us, and then we'll put, you know, photos up later. But so in Teo, what you do is you walk into a virtual space. It's set up in different ways. So the one that I joined was set up like a conference with the ballroom set up, so round tables and a stage. And you have an avatar, so you can play around with that. I had, you know, mine had pink hair and purple skin, whatever. And then you can move around the tables. And when you're at a table, you get to speak to the other people who are there, but you can't hear everybody else. It's like a breakout room, but it's really interesting because you still have the sense of the other people who are there and you see them reacting and talking and whatever it is. And then if somebody is up on the stage and they're talking, then everybody can hear them. And that's kind of, it mimics that sort of embodied experience of being in a conference. Tell me about that experience and what you heard and what participants said about it. For me, it was incredible because after months and months and months of sitting in Zoom breakout rooms, which are magical, you know, they work really well, that's amazing. The idea of like my body being aware of other people's body in that space was incredible. So I'd love for you to sort of, what were your thoughts? What surprised you about it?
I think what I found interesting is the reaction of seasoned facilitators to a new platform that is totally different from everything they have experienced so far. So on Theo, you don't have video.
Right.
And so the only visual you have is this avatar, which obviously doesn't react how you react. It's an AI that is kind of making it up. But you have different emoticons or emojis that you can share to express your instant feelings or a question or so. And from a host perspective, what I felt in the beginning, it just felt like herding cats, as Myriam would say. Because you don't have the visual clue, and and you need to find out where you have to locate yourself in order to be heard by everyone, and still you don't want to interrupt the flow. So if I move on stage where for sure everyone around the tables will hear me, I have to be very conscious about the fact that they might be in the middle of a different conversation.
Yeah.
So if I start speaking, then I interrupt them and I don't know. And I don't hear their noise.
Yes.
And at the same time, when I'm around the table and there's someone on stage who wants to share something as a participant, then at the table they really have to be silent, because otherwise they're disturbing the person on stage who wants to speak. So there are at the same time rules that apply that would be valid to the physical world, I would say. But since you're in this avatar space, it feels as if you need to remind yourself and the participants about these rules.
That's very true.
Yeah. And participants, I think they had very mixed feelings. There were some who just loved it, because you don't have you don't need to look good, right? So you can sit there in your pajama, nobody looks at the environment where you're in, you don't have to put out a green screen. You can even walk around at the same time. And therefore, you can be very focused, because there is no distraction. You don't open other tabs. You're just in this world. And others felt very disconnected, because they actually missed the visual clue of seeing facial expressions of the others. But I think it reminded me of the fact that depending on the purpose of why we meet, we have to choose carefully the tool we're using.
Yes. Yeah. And that brings me actually to the island, which was a very different tool. So I'll describe that as well. So it's a virtual world. Again, both of those worlds have very I'm going to say crappy rendering on purpose. Like they look like a game, and an old one at that. Like it's not like a PlayStation super highly rendered world, but that's fine. And so
programmers.
Yeah, and it's fine, because actually you're playing. It doesn't matter that it looks like the real world. And so in this one, you also have a body. In our case, it was like a robot with a TV as a head. So our video was there. You could see us. We were like on wobbling TV heads. But it's an island and it's a space, and you can kind of walk through the space. Sometimes there's a few objects. You can pick them up and wear a hat or whatever. But the really amazing thing about the purpose of this tool is that when you get closer to somebody, their volume goes up. And so it mimics that kind of pre-conference vibe where you're in the room with a lot of people, and different people are having different conversations, and you can join one and leave one. And it's a little, it's not as, you have to sit on the table to hear what people are saying, but more natural in that sense. Also messier and chaotic, which, a pre-conference room is always chaotic. And that's another very completely different purpose. So talk to me about how you involved people in that space, and how you ended up using it in the conference as well.
Yeah, so we used it to experiment pre-conference. When I first went on Borrel, and I think they changed the name in the meantime. So I first went on this island, I was just blown away, because you can have the embodied experience. So again, in one of the co-design sessions, participants mentioned that they are missing this turn to your neighbor moments. When I speak to you, I look at you, and when I speak to my neighbor, I look in a different direction, and everyone knows whom I'm talking to. Impossible in Zoom, because it's just flat. Impossible in Theo, because you don't have the video. Perfectly possible on Borrel, because you have this avatar with a video in your head as a kind of screen. And if you turn your avatar to the side, you would really focus on the person you want to address. What is also nice is, as you said, that you can really have this proximity, this play with proximity. And in the onboarding on the island, what I usually like to do is an icebreaker or energizer exercise, where I asked participants to pair up and to just play with distance. Okay, how does it feel when I come very, very close? It feels almost intimidating, and then
it's true.
You take your avatar and you go back because it's too close.
Yeah.
And how does it feel when you turn to someone else to address them? How does it feel when you eventually form a circle, and then it's beautiful to observe that when one more participant joins, suddenly the circle
You move.
opens and makes space to accommodate this extra person. So it's I think it's more gentle in terms of group experience, because on Zoom you appear and you're on the screen and you're there, but you don't have this welcoming kind of almost routine or ritual that you open the circle and you welcome someone as part of the group.
Yeah. I also projected that this would be a great tool for end of year kind of office parties, because even though you're sitting alone in your house, you can see a colleague and be like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while, and just like walk up to them. It's really, I wish you could see them from the back too. That's always a bit clunky, but it'll get there. But it just felt like a space where you could like behave more naturally in a group setting. And I have another question for you. I know that you experimented with a lot of different kinds of embodiment things. Like part of it was you created these cards that people could print at home and use to, express reactions. I know you had a cooking session planned, and of course all of these different virtual reality kind of spaces where you could experience things as if you were experiencing with your body. I found that to be a theme that I kept, obsessing about and coming back to. How do you think that facilitators, but I think also even just people in there having a Zoom call with colleagues about whatever, can integrate this embodiment experience? And what do you think are the benefits of doing that at the moment?
Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, I'm not in my office where I would have my prompts that I still use. So I think it was someone who inspired me. Maybe it was Mary Alice, who had these kind of sticks with analog prompts. And it was Jacinta Cubis with her. I had a podcast interview about using analog things for the video. And I think they're just any form of surprise that we can add to just the normal meeting, spice it up. And I have the impression that very often we're too concerned to be too serious. And yes, topics are serious. Yes, we have to have hairy conversations, but we are still human. And our brain functions better if we spice it up a little bit. We bring some light and some humanness in. So I think bringing in something analog to react just makes it more human and more surprising. And to experiment with different platforms for me as a facilitator also means there are different levels. On the one hand, it's to train the skill of being uncomfortable and experimenting with new tools. I think this nimble facilitation, okay, if something goes wrong, how do I react? How do I manage to communicate when I don't have video?
Yeah.
How do I communicate if not everyone can hear me to the same extent? So what are the rules that I have to set? How do I onboard the participants? I think that's, even if you then just go on a normal Zoom call, you have a different perception and a broader view, and maybe even compassion to the participants. And I think it also taught me, as I mentioned before, to be more mindful of choosing the tool according to the purpose of the call. So as you said, the island is perfect for leisure activities or after work drinks. And that's actually where the name comes from. So borrel is the Dutch name for after work drinks at 5. So you have some beer, and that's called a borrel.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And so, for instance, there's also Toasty, where you can have all these integrated games and prompting cards, which is fantastic to connect participants and to create the safe space. I would not necessarily use it for leadership board strategy discussion. And then you have Wander, where you have the law of 2 feet, where you can just wander around, what we used for our library cafe, which is nice because you see who's there and you can choose the space and define spaces on conversation topics. And then everyone is free to join the conversation they want and still have the overview of what's going on that you don't have at Bora, for instance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get that. I'm going to take a question from the audience, actually, which is a question that I wanted to ask anyway, so I'm happy it's there. So question is, what are some of the things that work better in virtual facilitation? And what are those aspects of the in-person experience that you're still trying to recreate virtually? And if there's a difference at all? I mean, I know that, virtual is between brackets, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
I love the question. And I think from the facilitation perspective, I think not so much has changed. I think meetings that were boring and energy suckers in the physical world are as boring as energy sucking in the virtual world. It just becomes more apparent. It's I think the virtual world is an amplifier, and I think our opportunity cost of joining a meeting when working from home are higher. Because whether I sit in my office and I walk to the meeting room and I sit in a bad meeting, well, I'm at the office anyway. But
Right.
if the alternative of being in a boring Zoom call is sitting on my couch and having a wonderful conversation with my family or reading a book, ooh, that's a different story, right? So the bad online meeting is much more painful because you know what else there could be. What I like to know, and I think it was Melissa Dinwiddie in a podcast interview who made me aware. She said, we're always trying to find out how we can translate our physical meetings into the online world instead of asking, what is there in the online world that we cannot do offline? So, for instance, the breakout rooms. You can have small groups. You can turn to your neighbor in a physical workshop, but you will always kind of hear the others in the background. You'll always hear maybe or feel this FOMO. Oh, they seem to have more fun. Oh, they're laughing. They're crying. Why are they so emotional, but we are not? So you're constantly kind of hearing somewhere else. And there's also this fear of what if someone listens? So you wouldn't speak as openly in a small group in the physical space as you do in a breakout room.
Right.
Because in the breakout room, nobody listens, for sure. So magic things happen there. And I think this is something that is so easy to do and is, underrated. Also, I think what we can do in the virtual is just to increase the pace. Because we don't need to walk in, we don't need to reshuffle the space, move flip charts around to clean up. So the pace of how we structure a workshop can be much faster. We can use music easier, we can use prompts, play videos. So all these kind of multimedia effects are much easier to use. And yeah, I think these are the basic things that I enjoy.
Thank you for that answer. I think that makes a lot of sense, to try and see what the online world provides for us that we couldn't have done otherwise. I have one last question for you, Myriam. I want you to complete a sentence and then explain the choice of words. So the future of facilitation is ...
The future of facilitation is that's a management skill, just like presentation skills. So for me, the future of facilitation is that there's no job opening for a management or leadership position without naming facilitation as one key skill that is required.
I think that's genius. And I get so many leaders talking to us about how to lead when you're not together, how to whatever, and how to kind of get the room together. And they hire us to do that for them, but they could be doing it themselves. I think that's really brilliant. All right. Well, before we close the session, Myriam, thanks so much for being such a wonderful guest and for talking about, all the different spaces that you created for all of us attendees of the Never Done Before or Never done before Facilitation Festival. I really thank you for your insights, and I will be thinking about a lot of these things for many weeks to come. Thank you to our attendees as well for tuning in and asking questions. Of course, the video will be reposted on our social pages and YouTube and so on. And don't forget to join me next week, Thursday, December 17th at 2:30 p.m. Dubai time. Our guest for the last episode of 2020 is Joe Santos, who you might remember from the Cosmic Conference if you've been watching us since July. He's an affiliated professor of practice and global management at INSEAD, and we'll be discussing the future of education and how to be a global leader in the emerging post-pandemic world. Lastly, if you don't do so already, please follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook. Tala, who's in the background here, spends a lot of time creating great content, so she'll be very happy if you do that. And you can visit our website, cosmiccentaurs.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. Myriam, once again, thank you so much for your time today. I had a lot of fun chatting about the festival and facilitation with you, and I'm very grateful for your time.
Thank you so much, Marilyn. It was a joy.
All right, signing us off.